A lot of people don't seem to know the difference between an evolutionary biologist and a marine biologist. Sure, there's overlap, but you can't just exchange one for the other. As an evolutionary biologist, I've tried to explain this difference to my family for years. I can sort of understand how they can get it mixed up, but when it gets to working out there, in the real world, there's really no reason why an employer would confuse the two. The terms aren't interchangeable. Therefore, I was skeptical when I was first asked to be involved with the Norwegian Float project. The study was to be conducted entirely at sea, with the help of both the Icelandic and Norwegian government. The entire project was government sanctioned, and everything was official and on the books. What wasn't talked about was what the project was actually about. For a time there was even a website, but the description was so generic that it was impossible to learn what was actually going on. Improving and understanding the life of a quickly changing ecosystem, said an important man in a fancy suit through a YouTube link on the front page. I have a saying: when something is so generic that it can be applied to everything, it doesn't mean anything. Let's take a step back. I'm a biologist, evolutionary biologist, specifically. I got everything up to my postdoc from the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, Stockholm. I've worked with a variety of colleagues from all over the world. I published a paper with a fellow scientist on environmental impacts of electromagnetism in 2015, which I highly recommend reading. When I was asked to work for the Norwegian Float back in 2017, I had just come back from a study in Iceland. I think this was what sparked their interest in my particular field of study, adaptation in rapid temperature shifts. My specialty is working with fruit flies and stickleback fish. I had been working in the active volcanic areas of Iceland when our operation was suddenly defunded. To this day, I'm not sure why. I don't think it was a coincidence. This is when I was contacted by Norwegian Float project, or NF for short. They asked me to be a part of a project located far out at sea, despite me being an evolutionary biologist. Again, not a marine biologist. It was weird, but I needed the work. Our entire Iceland project had been axed overnight, and I was just sitting at the hotel watching my bank account drain. I barely asked any questions. I just brought my sticklebacks and climbed aboard. Science ain't cheap. This is what I knew about NF at that point. The entire operation was set at the northern edge of the Norwegian Sea, just north of Iceland. No less than 4 science vessels were active on site, with daily check-ins from the Coast Guard. We were working in 4 teams, isolated from one another, only communicating through approved daily reports that went through what my boss called a funnel. It was a fancy way of saying all communication between teams was monitored, rewritten, and double-checked. Our vessel, the Hatchetman, could hold a crew of about 12 people, with plenty of space to run samples. On my first day out there, I still had no idea what was going on. My colleagues, 4 Norwegian men and an Icelandic woman, tried to fill me in. It is hard for a landlubber, like me, to be out in the middle of the Norwegian Sea like this. The waves can reach so high that you swear you're going to capsize. Nothing feels solid, and it can take days before you reach the point where you can feel the waves in your mind before you feel them in your legs. It dips into freezing temperatures at night, and the power necessary to keep climate control running is ridiculous. I can't imagine someone willingly staying out there for a prolonged period, and yet I signed up for 4 weeks. That was what was stated in my initial contract. We were assigned to work in pairs. I worked with the Icelandic woman, Selma. She was an actual marine biologist, and was just as surprised to see me there as I was. She had little to no idea what was going on either. We had our first mission briefing 36 hours after first stepping foot on the Hatchetman. We were sitting in this small cafeteria-sized room. Everything there is metal. and if the ship rocks too much, it all starts screeching. A man I'd never seen before had set up a projector, and our crew sat down to listen. Everyone was wearing thick jackets, caps and gloves, but most of us were still shuddering. The man with the projector wasn't. "Do you know the term island biome?" was the first thing he asked us. Most of us nodded. An island biome is the term for an ecologic system that has been largely separated from other systems for a long period of time. Kind of like the Galapagos Islands, Darwin's finches. We've found an island biome, and we need to study it. We need experts from a wide range of areas. So I imagine things will be a bit confusing as we start. Don't be afraid to air your concerns, but please be aware that we are just as confused as you are. He fired up the projector. The image made it clear. They'd found something, over 13,000 feet into the sea. A few weeks earlier, there had been a tectonic shift. The NF project had been a standby government task force between the Norwegian and Icelandic government for years, just in case they needed to put together a team at short notice. They had been expecting something like this to happen eventually. Shortly after the shift, they noticed areas of the ocean being discolored black through satellite imagery, looking for new land masses. Shortly afterwards, they found an isolated pocket far beneath the ocean surface. This pocket of the ocean, at about 14,000 feet, has been isolated for millions of years. Now it was released into the ocean. An isolated island biome is suddenly introduced to the Norwegian Sea. The reason for the ocean to turn black in the area was nothing short of microbes. Imagine the number of microbes necessary to colour the ocean for several square miles. We were shown a series of images. Thick slabs of goo, almost like oil, slapping against the hull of the Hatchetman. The man with the projector told us we would be allowed to study this in person, and that samples were already being provided. Further samples would be gathered at the request of the team. The implications of this were unfathomable. What kind of life forms have evolved to survive at those crushing depths? I'm not going to lie, I was excited to get started. So were my colleagues. We were issued some standard safety equipment and briefed on basic protocols. The project was fairly secret, as to avoid potentially damaging traffic, we had to surrender our personal cell phones to 2 men armed with pistols. That first night, we were given some initial samples. My colleagues were ecstatic, and most of the night we were up throwing around names for new species. At least 13 unknown kinds were identified just that first night. We were surprised to see that most of the microbes were fungi, as opposed to the expected algae mushrooms at the bottom of the sea. Who would have known? The first few days was amazing. Our reports were smoothly rolling between our 4 teams, and we'd identified at least 37 different types of fungi in the waters. By this time we were getting ready to send down deep-sea cameras and diving teams. We were still pretty excited about the entire event, and even the armed guards didn't seem so frightening to us. They were good guys just trying to do their job after all. They had no reason to be unpleasant. We all ate together in the cafeteria. Every day, lots of salted fish and crisp bread, as per Scandinavian tradition. My favourite guard, Hellman, made amazing mayonnaise and tuna sandwiches for us. At the end of the first week, we were getting some strange reports. Most of the fungus we'd been testing had a mineral in common that we were unable to identify. We tried to extract it, and in a few days we had 3 grams of a completely unknown metal sitting in our lab. Our boss was beyond excited. The third team had a geologist who was unable to even take a guess at what kind of metal we were looking at. It was almost like a crystalline structure, but more similar to lead. We were promised an expert would look into it in a couple of days. We still had our heads spinning with daily discoveries. We even discovered larger life forms, like fish. Still, they were smaller than the nail on your pinky finger, but they were actual complex life forms. completely black, pellet-shaped, and eyeless. These fish, just as the fungus, had large traces of the unknown metal embedded in their scales. Our superiors gave it the name of Blameless Metal, file-free in Norwegian, claiming with a shrug that it was as good a name as any. After all, it wasn't the metal's fault that it had surfaced. It was blameless, see? We found it kind of funny. You have to remember, we thought we were standing at the edge of the discovery of a century. We had a pretty bright headspace at the time. After 2 weeks, we were all pretty used to working on the higher dial. We all knew each other by name, and we had strict routines that we followed. The expert had arrived and was working with Team 2, but initial tests were inconclusive. The only thing we knew for sure was that the Blameless was a previously undiscovered kind of metal that most of the life forms had evolved to gain nourishment from. Selma and I were working on testing the effects of the fungus environment on my spickleback fish. The other teams were using divers to gain less pressure damage samples. There was also a deep-sea camera being set up, but we were having trouble finding relevant data. Every day, the microbes were diluted, and the massive amounts of moving water would start to drift us further and further away from the point of origin. Soon we were split up into 2 teams with 2 vessels each. Those following the microbe migration down the current, and those of us who stayed at the origin site. Selma theorized that a particular set of fungus was formed by how deep the isolation biome stretched, as the fungus closer to the ceiling of the bubble was smaller than the larger fungus that lived deeper down. Essentially, it allowed us to gain a sense of how large the pocket really was. Selma ballparked that it was about 2,000 to 2,500 meters in depth, depending on size variation. Still, the crown of our discovery was, by far, the unidentified metal. At the start of my 4th week, I started to see a troubling change in my spicklebacks. I noticed there were fewer of them, and that the water was growing darker despite having a functioning filter. Their behavior changed. They would start swimming in circular patterns around one of the larger females, who would eat them alive. She grew to be more than 3 times the size of the other spicklebacks, and in 2 days she was the only living fish left in the tank. The dark colour of the aquarium came from rapidly multiplying fungus. A lack of pressure didn't seem to be an issue. I reported this to our superiors and asked to do further testing on how fast this fungus could spread, and whether it was a vast difference when treated with fresh, salt, or brackish water. Selma agreed that it was important, and she was starting to grow worried. However, it was made clear that our main focus should be the metal. Apparently, Team 2 had found that it was extremely reflective. They had managed to gather enough to make a small cube of it, and the thing reflected so much light that it could damage your eyes during prolonged contact. It could also gain enough heat to start a small fire. It was extremely conductive, far surpassing gold and copper. With this potential game-changer at hand, my spicklebacks weren't the focus of the Norwegian government anymore. Selma, on the other hand, was anxious. While she took on the responsibility of doing whatever tests management asked us to, I was free to keep experimenting on the spicklebacks and their reaction to the fungus. One morning when I got to the lab, week 5, the big spickleback female, dubbed Kroger by my team, was nowhere to be seen. The lid of the small aquarium had been pushed aside, and a black slime trail had been left on the floor. I found Kroger wiggling halfway across the room, straight towards my other spicklebacks in the control tank. We decided enough was enough and killed it. That's when we discovered a few troubling features during the autopsy. Kroger had lost both her eyes, and the bones had deteriorated to a sort of black mush. The entire physiology of the fish was getting replaced by something jelly-like. The concentration of the metal was higher, especially in the brain. Selma flagged in her report that we needed to take increased security measures, and that the fungus could be dangerous when inhaled. Management didn't listen. but we started wearing gas masks from that point on. Many of my colleagues followed suit voluntarily. This was only the start of our troubles. The diving teams reported getting burns, as if stung by jellyfish, straight through their diving suits. We were told about long lightning-like burns on their torsos, arms and thighs. One of them had apparently been so harshly burned that they had gone into anaphylactic shock. They had to be immediately returned to the surface, risking decompression sickness. We were not told about this in any of the reports, but by the guards who we'd gotten to know by now. Hellman was just as worried as we were, but everything went to shit when, by week 6, it started raining. It was a cold morning in early April when the rains came, and it was immediately obvious that something wasn't right. The water drops were thick and almost the size of golf balls. Some of them fell so hard and fast that there were cracks in the glass of the main bridge. We were ordered inside, but Selma managed to get a few samples. The management was duct taping towels to the glass, trying to cover it up. It was the same fungus that we'd studied, but slightly refined. The fungus had tagged along the evaporating ocean water and become a part of the rain formation cycle. This happens to some degree in nature all the time, but I'd never seen anything like it. It was far too aggressive. The clouds were solid black. Drops weren't just falling, they were dripping, forming a paw-like texture on the black clouds. The sky looked like a big, hairy creature, with drops falling from hair-like tendrils. For a moment, it felt like the end of the world. Nothing has ever made me feel so small, so insignificant. The guards were having trouble getting their uniforms off. The droplets were so thick and quickly hardened, turning it into a slime-like substance. Niels, one of my colleagues, was starting to complain about a stinging salt-like sensation in his eyes. Thinking back on what happened to Kroger, I was getting a bad feeling. It all went to hell quickly. Niels locked himself in the bathroom, vomiting. One of the guards, Hellman, stripped naked and started scratching his skin with an army knife. Selma and I tried to get into our safety equipment, but there was no time. 3 of our colleagues got there first, and one of the guards started waving his pistol around. Things were about to go bad, so we just stepped out. We wrapped ourselves in ponchos and hurried up on deck. The drops were so big that I was struck to the ground. Selma helped me up, but stepped away as she saw my hands covered in black. Trying to walk on the upper decks was like sliding back and forth in wet mud. We also noticed the boat wasn't rocking as much as usual. The ocean surface had turned a bit more, solid. We got to the main bridge, but were locked out. They refused to let us in. And when we were being insistent, they started threatening us. They assured us they would use force to keep us out if necessary. We abandoned the idea and ran to the rescue boats, pulled the plastic tarp over us, and tried to wait it all out. After a few hours, the clouds covered the sky. It was barely 11 a.m., and it was completely black outside. Selma and I stayed quiet, hearing the thick smatter of droplets on the plastic tarp. We could hear screams coming from the main deck. Selma peeked out at one point, but quickly looked away. "There's something in the water," she whispered. I peeked out, but could only catch a glimpse before Selma pulled me away. There were thousands of them. Endless fairy lights. Just beneath the mucus surface of the ocean, I'm sure it was the reflective metal reacting to our warning lights, bouncing off of thousands of life forms. By 1 p.m, we heard gunshots. We hid under the tarp, but could hear the scene playing out. Someone was running out on the main deck, followed by at least 6 other people. While Selma was looking away, I peeked out. I could see Hellman standing at the front of the main deck. He was naked and bleeding, holding a gun out towards 5 of our colleagues. In the front was Niels, his face turned completely black. I couldn't see his eyes. "Stay back," Hellman screamed. "Get back inside." They didn't stay back. Instead, they reached for him, groaning, "Kill me." They begged, "Eat me." As they grabbed Hellman, he started firing blindly. I covered my head and ears, just waiting for it all to be over. For at least half an hour, there were guttural screams. People begging, pleading, screaming for Hellman to kill them and eat them. People crying, screaming, and trying to force themselves into his mouth. What worries me is what I heard at the end before things went quiet. They were no longer begging and crying, they were thanking him. Then nothing. A few hours passed. We could hear helicopters, and the drops stopped falling on our tarp. You have no idea how loud a helicopter really is until you're standing right below one. They're deafening. Selma and I were given blindfolds and carried out to a nearby Coast Guard boat. People were screaming in Icelandic, but I could barely hear it over the helicopters. As we were getting further and further away from the site, I slowly realized that Selma and I had been separated. I'd had my blindfold on for close to 8 hours when I was pushed into a decontamination room. My clothes were cut off with scissors, and I was sprayed with freezing water and antiseptics. I could have sworn it was pure chlorine. They shaved my head. They took blood tests, and I was forced to blow through some kind of a tube, like a sobriety test. They also tapped my teeth with some sort of tiny hammer. I was in quarantine for a week. It wasn't bad, just a small room and no human contact. No internet, but pretty much anything I could ask for otherwise. I spent that week reading and writing down my thoughts. Pretty much everything I wrote down was confiscated by the end of the week, and I was forced to sign an agreement not to talk about it. I'm thinking, to hell with it. What the hell is Iceland going to do about it? I've been completely disconnected from the Norwegian Float project since, but it is still up and running. I've read reports about black spots appearing along the ocean current, and I suspect the fungus is migrating. The northern coast of Iceland was briefly evacuated following the resurgence of one of these black spots, but they claimed it was for seismologic reasons. Bullshit. Didn't see any papers mentioning the apparent mass suicides. That's why I'm on Reddit. This is where I get the real info. I've seen videos of people freaking out the same way the crew of the Hatchetman did, begging to be killed and eaten. It seems to be a recurring pattern, and I've seen it triggered in all manner of strange ways. The weirdest thing I've seen was some sort of video game triggering the same effect in people. Also, one of my old colleagues seems to have worked on something that seems eerily familiar to the blameless metal we found. Small world, isn't it? It's the same person I worked on my article about electromagnetism back in 2015. I think the NF project has tried to contain this thing. There was a period when there were barely any black spots at all during most of 2018 to 2019. But all of a sudden they just started popping up out of nowhere. They're still out there. You can find them on Google Maps even. See for yourself. The biggest I've seen is at 54.716734772316666, negative 22.272494133331312. It wasn't just Brexit that screwed with commercial fishing in the UK. Let's leave it at that. It started off the coast of Norway and Iceland, but there are black spots appearing as far away as Ireland and the UK. By my predictions and following the migration patterns, the next few spots will start to appear outside the coast of Newfoundland and the Gulf of St. Lawrence in late 2021. Just as an example, I'll show you a satellite image I found from last September. Please keep in mind that this was just south of the coast of Greenland. It is not far away from the US mainland by now. Image. I don't even want to think about what the Kroger human will look like, but from my calculations it could be a monstrosity as tall as 20 feet. That's just a rough estimate based on the little time I had to study these things. Look for the black spots. Look for the symptoms. They make you beg and squirm. They make you want to be eaten. I was going to tell you about a forgotten indie game from 2009, but halfway through writing this, people started begging me to kill them. So, yeah, let's talk about Hatchetman Cove. At first, I wrote this entire post as a way to get people to uninstall and remove the game Hatchetman Cove from their Steam accounts, but I soon realized pretty much no one has ever played it. But if you by any chance happen to own a copy, please, I urge you, remove it. Uninstall and forget it. Don't look back. Don't touch it ever again. I'll tell you why. A friend of mine bought a 3-pack of Hatchetman Cove back in 2009. It was a multiplayer game where 3 people are paired up against a single strong player on the opposite team, kind of like an early Dead by Daylight game. This game might very well be a spiritual predecessor. The similarities between those games are pretty eerie. I'm sure at least one person on the Dead by Daylight team has a Steam copy of Hatchetman Cove, and that kind of worries me. See, Hatchetman Cove was this game where you played in cycles, kind of like a red light, green light game. 3 people play as survivors from a ship that crashed into the cove, and a 4th player gets to play as the killer. The killer wasn't necessarily some slasher with an axe. It could be a vengeful angel, a grim reaper, or several other kinds of killer. At least that was the original plan. So the game would alter between having bright lights all over the map going on and off. While they were on, the killer would notice any kind of movement with a ping. When the lights were off, survivors could move any way they want as long as they didn't draw too much attention. They could set up traps to delay the killer or sabotage the lights to get more time. The killer, on the other hand, was to grab the survivors and drown them in a well at the center of the map. Once a survivor was grabbed, the other survivors are given a choice to either try and intercept the killer using traps, or use the time to gain an advantage. The problem was that Hatchetman Cove didn't sell very well. The developers had some legal trouble with their publisher, who were pissed about the developers backing out of an exclusive deal with OnLive. Check it, it's on Wikipedia. There was no promotion on Steam or anywhere else, as the publishers didn't want it released on another platform. They didn't want it released at all for another 6 months, until the game had the proper infrastructure. The devs screwed up and published it on Steam anyway, and the whole thing was a mess. Still, during the months that it was active, there was a fairly regular player base. My friends and I played it pretty much every day for about a month. I mained Sturgis as a survivor, the Norwegian fisherman who could lure the killer using his fishing rod. As a killer, there were only 2 options at the time, the Hatchetman and the Blameless. I preferred to play the Hatchetman. He was straightforward. You got a hatchet, could destroy shelters, and had a certain resistance to traps. The Blameless, she was just weird. They never managed to balance her right. The Blameless was an old woman. She was slow, but she floated around the map and avoided all ground-based traps. She always had this warm smile, and her passive ability was just the weirdest. If she was far away, she would look like a random ally on your team. Only when she got closer would she reveal that sinister smiling face. Hatchetman was just a murderer, but the Blameless was downright creepy. But the game didn't get any updates because of the legal battle. No updates, no new survivors, no killers, nothing. Instead, the game went silent. We stopped playing, and a few months later, the game was unceremoniously unlisted and removed from the Steam store without as much as an apology. I uninstalled Hatchetman Cove and didn't think about it for years. Just one of those games that rest in the back catalogue. I forgot I even had it. But this is where things get weird. Last December, I was gifted the new Harvest Moon game as a Christmas present, and some primal part of my reptile brain clicked back in on Hatchetman Cove. The friends I used to play with had moved on with their lives, but the game still had a Steam community page. I checked the store page, and it was empty. The game couldn't be found on Google either, The game was completely hidden. If you don't actually have it in your library, you won't find it without a direct link. That in itself is kind of weird. Most abandoned games can still be Googled, but Hatchetman Cove still had a very, very active community. There were plenty of discussions on the forums, but they didn't make any sense. Their speech was almost garbled. I'm sure whatever they discussed made sense to them, but to an outsider, it seemed like nonsense. A few examples. Topic: how much GW2 finish no min? I want to finish no min, I don't know yet. Just don't GW then. Get your shit together. You'll never go min if you don't GW, just commit. The discussion forum is just a mess. The example above was the most legible thing I could find, and I still have no idea what it says. So I started checking out the community content, like videos and screenshots. The way the community played the game was completely different from when I played. Pretty much no one played Hatchetman anymore. The killer seemed limited to the Blameless. Not a single screenshot of the Hatchetman, just the Blameless. But the weirdest thing was how players interacted with the killer. Instead of hiding, they come running up to her. They run up to her with their microphones on, screaming at her. Screaming, begging, pleading for her to kill them. Not with funny voices or anything, no. There were people crying in chat. Videos marked with GW. And various dates littered the community page, each with people crying and screaming and begging to die. The volume maxed out immediately, and most of the time all voices were nothing but a crackling mess that could easily blow out your speakers. I couldn't stop watching. I'd never seen anything like it, not even back in the days when I was still playing. That wasn't the way you played the game. No one was hiding or looking for objectives. I'd see players using my old main, Sturgis, and just rush the Blameless as soon as the match started. Seeing the 3D model of the old bearded man running up to the Blameless, pleading to die. That was uncomfortable. I made the mistake of posting my own question on the discussion forum. I was just too curious. You have to remember, at this point, this was still just a weird blip in my Steam library. I made my own topic and just asked what the hell happened to the game. I got no responses in a week. Nothing. After that, things have gotten weird. Real weird. It started with CSGO. One night, a teammate came on and just started screaming. No big deal at first, just another troll, but he was screaming at me, specifically. Screaming at me, begging me to shoot him. There was crying. He was desperate, asking me to please team kill him. He offered to send me money, trade rare skins, whatever I wanted. He got kicked before I even knew what to say. 2 games later, the same guy joins my team with a different username and clan tag. He keeps screaming, crying and begging. My teammates laughed, but I was getting uncomfortable. I stopped playing. Hearing a grown man barely being able to breathe between sobs is just too much. That wasn't a prank, that was desperation. But it didn't stop there. From that point on, in several games, people started joining and begging me to kill them. It could be by text, in Steam chat, by voice, whatever they could. Once in Fall Guys, there were 2 people with the usernames Kill Me and Kill Me Too. How? You can't even pick your own username in Fall Guys. They just stood there, waiting for me to push them over the edge. These colourful little blob people just made my stomach crawl, because I knew that whoever controlled them was sitting there, screaming in a complete panic behind the screen. It just kept going. In Red Dead Redemption 2, I used to have the setting to hear and be heard by everyone enabled, but I had to stop. Naked users came running at me while I was camping out at Strawberry, and I turned off all audio as soon as I saw them. I was shaking as I realised the mute setting didn't work, and I force-closed my game. I swear, for a few seconds after the executable had closed, I could still hear them. I threw my headphones across the room and walked away from the computer, just holding my head and quivering. I didn't know what to do. I could barely be at my computer. I went back to the Hatchetman Cove Steam forums and just started reporting people. I also reported all videos to YouTube, and I just flagged everything. I know, I abused the report system, but things were getting out of hand. I was being harassed. So they took it down. Not just the forums or the videos, but everything. The entire Steam page. Gone, including the community page. I could still see the name Hatchetman Cove in my library at that point, but nothing showed up when I clicked it. YouTube and Steam probably didn't care much, and didn't bother to do a review on my reports. It was easier to just pull the plug. And for a while, that did the trick. I actually got back on CSGO. Then, it got worse than ever. Random people started joining our Discord server, just screaming into our ears. No matter how many times we banned them or muted them, they just kept coming back. My friends noticed that as long as I was offline, their voices stayed away, so my server figured I was playing a prank or something. At first they thought it was kind of funny, but the more it happened, the more they were getting frustrated. Some were getting scared and sent me private messages asking me to please, as friends, stop. Today, I'm permabanned. I can't even log back onto Discord without getting messages from random accounts, begging me to come online and kill them. It has gotten to the point where I've uninstalled pretty much everything. I don't even have Skype. I don't play games anymore, and I don't think I'll be browsing Reddit much longer either, since I've started getting messages here too. Not just here, but on my phone as well. Texts in the middle of the night. Random calls from unknown numbers. Last week, I found traces of handprints on my kitchen window. Not just one or two, but dozens. A neighbour told me there'd been someone shouting outside my door when I was out buying groceries the other day. I'm considering calling the police, but I don't know what to say. I don't even know if I'm in danger. I can't get the bland face of the Blameless out of my head. I dream of her asking me, without moving her crinkled old mouth, if I want it all to stop, and I say yes. I go to her, dressed as old Sturgis, standing alongside the others with my fishing rod. First, I ask her to end it all, but the others speak louder, and she can't hear me. Then I ask again, trying to speak over the others. Soon I find myself screaming. We all scream, louder and louder, begging, pleading, crying for her attention. We all want it to stop, and she refuses to oblige. Instead, she just smiles, holding some sort of beautiful secret behind her pixelated, dead eyes. I don't know what it is, but I want it. I've been living with Marielle for 4 years. To say she is my girlfriend is not enough. We're on the edge of getting engaged and making it official, but the pandemic put a pin in our plans. We found lots of new things to do in that time. We agreed early on to get our own hobbies, so we wouldn't go crazy being in each other's faces all the time during lockdown. I started taking online keyboard lessons and drawing, while she got back to her childhood love, online gaming. We both started a diary just to physically see what we're doing from day to day, and to remind us that we're progressing. Marielle became part of a raiding guild in a large online MMO. She's a natural organizer and second in command to the guild leader, called Password. They all have these ridiculous usernames, and hearing her talk to them over Discord sounds like a cheap spy movie. There's Password, Killer, Alder, and a whole bunch of others. My girlfriend calls herself Empty. She says it's a reference to her carefree nature, that she is empty of worry. Yesterday I woke up to find her gone. She took the car, every dollar of our joint account, and a bag of clothes. I didn't hear the car as it left the driveway. She's been acting weird and keeping more to herself than usual. She's been having trouble with her phone and computer, but most of the time we've spent together, she's been her usual loving self. I had no idea. She left an open document on her computer, and I want to see if anyone can make sense of this. It is an excerpt of her diary. Marielle, if you're reading this, please come back. 21:19 p.m. CDT GMT-5, April 6, 2021. First off, do not say the cited phrase on video. I'll mark it in cursive. If you do, it'll be replaced with the same video that mine was. It is a rule. I was uploading the in-game footage from our monthly guild meeting when something strange happened. The video was immediately taken down. I got a notice about a part of my video containing copyrighted footage, and the entire video was claimed. I first thought it was a bot, as the claimant was just a long series of letters and numbers. Seemingly random. PA01 ALALKIOS 04 MA08. There was a part of my video that had been marked containing the copyrighted footage, and I just laughed when I saw it. It is a short segment where Password is recounting the guild member who've contributed to the monthly donation box in March. It goes, Password 01, Older, Killer, Austin, 04, Markdown, 08. This meant Password gave $10, Older gave $40 twice, Killer and Austin gave $40 each, Markdown gave $80 in one sum at the end of the month. I can't stress this enough. You shouldn't say those words on YouTube. The first thing I noticed about this claim was the claimant itself. The name is basically code for what Password read aloud in the video. PA01, meaning Password 01, for example. Take a second look at it. The other thing I noticed was that the video was taken down, but there's no way to dispute the claim. There's nothing but a big blue submit button. I just pressed it. Maybe I shouldn't have. Instantly, the video turned unlisted, and the part where Password is reading was replaced with a weird video clip. I'll link it. It is this odd inverted black and white clip of some kind of black background with a hint of cables. It is a mess. The text unauthorized and a series of numbers and letters run in the top of the corner. There's a monotone sound blaring. In the middle of the video, it jump cuts to a face holding up a finger to its lips, as if shushing the viewer. The figure has part of a face, part of a torso, and a hand, that's all. We can't see any eyes, cheeks, hair, nothing. Anonymous. The clip plays, and then the video resumes. I showed it to my guildmates, and they had no idea what was going on. I'm looking into this in the morning. We've got a raid tonight. 08:21 AM CDT GMT-5, April 7th to 2021. The numbers and letters correspond with the username of the claimant, which in turn is short for the phrase we accidentally said in the video. I think it might be some sort of key phrase embedded into the content ID system. 8 seconds, 15 hundredths. The original clip was just past 9 seconds, so there's a difference. It recognizes the phrase, takes your video down, and replaces your clip with something that censors the code if you submit. It seems fine in writing though. Maybe it changes if I upload it somewhere a content recognition software is running. Anyway, I've emailed the YouTube support about it. 12:48 p.m. CDT GMT-5, April 15th, 2021. 3 emails, no response. We've taken out the code part of the video and re-uploaded it, no problem. 22:06 p.m. CDT GMT-5, April 16th, 2021. I got a call just now. It was just a monotone noise. I recognized it from the video. The caller ID just said submit, like the little blue button I clicked on YouTube. I'm pretty sure I accidentally bugged something in the algorithm. I'm going to do an experiment. 04:06 AM, CDT, GMT, -5, April 17th, 2021. I've been up all night. I made a video on my phone with me just reading the keywords and uploaded it to Twitter. The tweet just got deleted. I got a DM from a user with the same name as the YouTube claimant with just the word unauthorized in all caps. I've tried Instagram and TikTok, and it is all just taken down. It only seems to be YouTube where it can't just be deleted and is instead replaced and made private. Searching for the username gives literally no Google search results, not even one. 6:06 AM, CDT, GMT, -5, April the 17th, 2021. Got a text from an unknown number. It just said unauthorized. 6:31 PM, CDT, GMT, -5, April 17th, 2021. Turned my phone off. Kept getting spammed by text messages, all saying unauthorized. 12:51 PM, CDT, GMT, -5, April 17th, 2021. I turned on my phone and got another call from Submit. This time I tried saying the words into the monotone. The tone just stopped. I sat there quiet. 6 seconds passed. Then I heard this robotic voice say, unauthorized. I think this system believes I'm trying to access something I'm not authorized to get into. Next time I'll try saying something else. 18:12 PM, CDT, GMT, -5, April 21st, 2021. It has been quiet for a couple of days, but I got another call tonight. This time I said, submit. The monotone disappeared. Then the voice responded, confirm. I just repeated, submit. Then the weirdest thing happened. It sounded like someone trying to pick up the phone at the other end, but there was a struggle. I could hear a no, but the call was cut short. I recorded the entire thing. A friend of mine is looking into the Claimant on YouTube. Apparently there's some sort of invite-only forum for people who specialize on internet sleuthing and looking up the real person behind certain usernames. 23:56 PM, CDT, GMT, -5, April 26th, 2021. No response yet. 2 guys on the opposite team came up to me in the battlegrounds and begged me to kill them. Over and over. My guildies laughed their asses off, but I found it kind of weird. It wasn't just trolling, it seemed off. 9:41 PM, CDT, GMT, -5, May 4th to 2021. There was a hit on the username. There was a password leak from a game developer back in 2004 where someone had that username. There's also a password, Zamarkand, with every vowel replaced with a 6. I typed it out on my phone as a reminder to myself, and it just went black. Complete factory reset as soon as I put in that last D in the password. What the fuck? 14:12 PM, CDT, GMT, -5, May 4th to 2021. I got my phone to work, and as soon as it started up, I got called again. I started the recording. This time I said the username, then the password, in order. The voice said, confirm, and I actually got a ringing noise, as if calling someone. The other end picked up, but they were quiet. I tried explaining that this was a mistake, and that whoever they were, I just didn't want anything to do with them. Blameless, they said. You're blameless. It was a man's voice, old, hoarse throat. Yes, I am, I responded. It is all a mistake. There was such a loud noise that I dropped the phone. The voice screamed out, blameless, so loud that my phone just fried its own loudspeakers. My ears were ringing for minutes. My phone is beyond saving at this point. I think the battery snapped in half. Needless to say, the recording was lost. 18:06 p.m. CDT GMT-5, May 16th to 2021. Someone pointed at me in the grocery store today. Young guy, late teens, glasses. He just pointed at me and said blameless. He had this weird blank stare. He lives around here. I've seen him before. I just got out of there. Freaked me out. 22:20 p.m. CD TGMT-5, May 16th to 2021. People are stalking me in-game. They're sending me private messages, asking me to kill them, over and over, begging and pleading. They keep calling me blameless. My guildies aren't laughing about it anymore. 03:01 p.m. CDT GMT-5, May 17th to 2021. Someone joined our Discord, just screaming and crying. They got muted and banned. They tried joining under a different name, but our moderators didn't let them through. We've put up a temporary hold on new members. 8:40 p.m. CDT GMT-5, May 17th to 2021. Things are getting out of hand. I haven't slept, but I'm not tired. I'm off the computer. Carl called me blameless in his sleep. He just flipped over, looked at me and murmured it. I don't think he was even awake. Why am I not tired? No phone, no computer, nothing. I'm off grid. Well, except for the pad I'm writing this on. 8:56 p.m. CDT GMT-5, May 17th, 2021. Blameless, 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 how the F blameless, blamel ook are the S blameless. I doing this im not blamel even connect SBL TED to the inter AMI net less. 12:01 p.m. CDT GMT-5, May 26th to 2021. I'm on Carl's computer. It is Wednesday. I don't sleep anymore. I don't get tired. Awake for 9 days. Blameless is not something you are. It is like a title. They follow the title, not the person. Carl keeps saying blameless in his sleep. Someone left a gun on the hood of my car. I thought about calling the police, but I just left it on the sidewalk. I took a walk in the woods behind the house today, and someone was screaming off the path. They were screaming that I had to kill them. I heard running. There were 3 of them. I got away. I hid in the bushes while they were crying. Submit was not just a button. It is a choice you do. I was an idiot who chose to submit. I am blameless now. 05:40 p.m. CDT GMT-5, June 6th, 2021. I killed for the first time today, and it made the rest shut up for a while. They kind of forced me, but not really. They put the gun in my hand, but I just wanted them to fucking stop screaming. It was this sweet release, and my ears stopped ringing. I even got a bit tired I might sleep tonight. My stomach churned. I wanted to eat them. Just delete and remove everything about them. They chose to submit too, but they are not the blameless. 03:36 a.m. CDT GMT-5, June 12, 2021. 18 of them, and there are more coming. We were in a clearing, and they were waiting for me. There were white vans parked nearby, but I didn't care who watched. I just started killing. I wanted the begging to stop the sounds, to stop the screaming. The silence feels like being reconnected to the might of God. I miss just hearing nothing. I ate so much. 05:16 a.m. CDT GMT-5, June 18th, 2021. Carl said it in his sleep. My first instinct was to kill him, to eat, but I didn't. This is all so fucking absurd. I'm collecting my thoughts. I agreed to something I didn't know what it was. There was something that changed in me. I was marked. Some kind of dormant system picked up my accidental code and it woke up. It woke up in me. The target. Carl, when you read this, I've left town. I don't want to hurt more people. I'm going into the woods where most can't find me. I don't know what other changes there will be. I barely eat. I don't sleep. My skin is losing colour. And there are these blotches in my throat that make me sound weird. Hoarse throat. I just keep waiting to hear someone ask me to kill them. It's like a phantom voice, just out of reach. They just trigger something in me. And I go into this rage. Just thinking about it makes me so fucking mad. I keep getting these thoughts that aren't mine. A spot in the ocean. A woman on the edge of a cove. Holding my hand to the braying sound of desperate worshippers. Black rain rising from the earth, daintily falling back into the clouds. Lightning frozen in the sky like bursting veins. Breathing boils of flesh and tendons willingly given. I'm not in love with you anymore, Carl. I love the cove and the Hatchetman. I love me. I'm blameless. I have to leave to save you. I don't even want to anymore, but I've already committed to doing so. If I were to change my mind now, I'd do terrible things to you, but I've already decided. I've already promised myself I wouldn't change my mind, no matter what. Even if it would mean you staying with me forever. Even if it would mean you standing by my side at the edge of the cove. Love eternal. Even if it meant us submitting. I won't do it. I'll leave you to a tragic life not knowing what God means. Because I promised myself I would, and I'm so fucking sorry. I want you to find me. I want you to submit. I also know I do not want to want this. But I do. Please don't. The document had about 180 pages after this. Just filled with the word, blameless, repeated over and over. I've tried cleaning it up so I could post it, but some of what she's saying is just complete nonsense. I don't believe in internet voodoo, and I don't know what the online community knows. I think she got involved with something. I've tried talking to her guildmates, but they haven't heard anything from her for over a month. She has no history of mental illness in her family. We've called the police, and we're tracking the car, but so far we've got nothing. I've tried doing what she mentioned, to upload a video of the key phrase. The same thing still happens. It gets replaced with the clip she linked. That's a thing. And I've submitted it to the police. They have no idea what to make of it, but they believe it might be some kind of cult. I don't even know what to think anymore. What to feel. I miss her so much. And to think she's been through something so huge on her own just churns my stomach. Why wouldn't she tell me? Marielle is not a bad person. She doesn't do what this text says she does. She doesn't believe in ghosts and goblins. She's a gardener, not a murderer. Her phone cover has a smiling blue sunflower on it. If you're reading this, please come back. Please seek help. Please don't leave it like this. Hi guys, thanks for listening. That story was written by Saturdead. If you enjoyed it, please give the video a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. I've also got a full playlist dedicated to Saturdead's work if you'd like to dive into more. And tonight's fun fact. Did you know the very first video ever uploaded to YouTube in 2005 was called Me at the Zoo? It was just 18 seconds long and it's still online today. Goes to show some clips never disappear, unlike Marielle. Too soon? Good night. I spent last summer backpacking and hitchhiking from Knoxville to New York. Having just finished my sociology degree, I figured I'd do something bucket listy before starting my new job in early September. I've always loved spontaneous travel, to just go where the wind takes me. and that summer was the first time I had the money to do so. With some comfort, I could stay at the occasional motel, hop on a train, or just take a cab every now and then. I had options, and I wanted this to be a final youthful adventure before I got stuck in the rat race. I made my way up through Kingston, Princeton, and Beckley, heading northeast. I hitchhiked most of the way, but I sometimes had to walk for hours before someone pulled over to give me a ride. I even had a cardboard sign saying, "New York, New York." But man, it gets rough out there. Nothing to protect you from sudden rain, and there's no guarantee you'll find a place to stay before it gets dark, and you don't want to fall asleep when you're getting a ride from someone. Safety first. By the time I got to the small town of Juniper, West Virginia, I was exhausted. I stopped at a cafe to get some directions and a bite to eat. Got myself a smiling little blue sunflower pin, some kind of local charity thing. What can I say? The thing was next to a wanted poster of 2 kids. I felt bad. As I didn't know a lot of the people in the area, and I'd been walking for the better part of the past 2 days, I decided to catch a Greyhound going north, not too far. Just enough to get me to Morgantown. I knew some people there, and figured a shower and a warm home-cooked meal would turn my frown upside down. I asked the cashier for directions. "Buses don't stop in Juniper," she said. "We don't get those." Strange. I stuck around for a couple of hours before I got back on the road. No one was looking twice at my cardboard plea, so I just had to keep going on my own. By that time, I had learned exactly one thing about Juniper, that buses don't stop there. And I was about to learn a second thing, that the roads are concrete garbage. I'd been walking for about 2 hours. It was getting dark. I was following the main road out of town when a piece of concrete got loose, causing me to slip and twist my ankle. I fell over by the roadside, clutching my foot, and already seeing some bruising. Now, there really was no other option but to get to a bus. I backtracked to a culvert down the road and found myself a piece of rebar that I could use as a walking stick. As the streetlights turned on, I was pissed. I thought about calling for a cab, but I was in the middle of nowhere and didn't know how to describe it. I get anxious on the phone. Finally, just around a bend, I could see a bus stop. Just this little sign by the side of the road, not even a bench or anything. But there was already a guy waiting there, so I figured I was on the right track. I hobbled up there and plopped down at the side of the road. I tried to bandage my ankle and give it some support, but I'd have a hard time walking for the next few days either way. There was no getting away from that. All the while, the other guy kept staring at me. I had no idea what kind of bus went through there, but I figured if someone else was waiting for one, it couldn't be too far out of line, but judging from the way the other guy looked at me, something was off. At first look, there wasn't anything inherently strange about him. Just some guy in his early 40s. Dirty jeans, rolled up flannel shirt, and a grey baseball cap. The only thing that kinda stood out was his scarf. It was this yellow pastel fleece type scarf which covered most of his neck. It looked a bit out of place, but not so much that I initially even thought about it. But the guy kept staring at me. There was something off about the way he looked at me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you know when the next bus gets here?" No response. No acknowledgement of any kind. No nods or head shakes. "Excuse me, sir," I repeated. "Is there a bus coming?" Still, nothing. I shrugged it off. Maybe he didn't speak English. But even then, he ought to have said something. I waited for the better part of an hour. The sky grew dark, and I was slowly coming to terms with having to sleep outside for the night. If need be, I had a tent. I'd be fine. Still, the creepy guy was still standing there staring at me. He wasn't even checking his phone or anything, he just kept looking my way, pacing back and forth. I tried to put into words exactly what bothered me about him. The first thing I noticed was his eyes. They didn't seem to blink in unison. He would close one eye, open it, and then close the next one. And it wouldn't be a pattern. It was seemingly random, but quick. You wouldn't catch it at first glance. Secondly, there was his chest. When he stood still, I could see him take very shallow breaths. There was this faint noise coming from his nose, like micro whistles. At one point, there hadn't been a single car passing by for 15 minutes. Suddenly, the strange man walked up to me. He looked at me with those wild, random eyes. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Do you—" Before I could finish my sentence, he grasped the bus stop sign and tipped it over. He barely made an effort. An uncomfortable thought washed over me. Maybe he put that sign up in the first place. I took out my phone, as if to show him that I was ready to call for help, if need be. I got up on my feet, leaning against my rebar crutch. "There's no bus coming, is there?" I asked. There was no response. Instead, he stopped pacing. Not just stopped, as in stopped moving, but as in stopping so completely that it looked like he wasn't even breathing. The only thing moving was the size of his pupils, slowly growing wider, like a cat ready to pounce. Something in the back of my mind screamed at me to run, but my ankle didn't let me. I got about 3 steps down the road before he tackled me, sending us both reeling down a 15-feet slope. All the while, he kept taking these shallow breaths, like an excited dog. I found myself face first in the dirt, with this stranger's body next to me. A dense pine forest stretching out for miles ahead. My head was spinning, trying to figure out what was even happening. As I scrambled to get back on my feet, I couldn't stop focusing on this one stupid detail, that his body was incredibly light. It was like getting tackled by a water balloon. By the time I got up, my attacker was ready to pounce again. Somewhere down the slope I must have dropped my phone. As he lurched forward, I swung my piece of rebar in a wide arc, smacking him on the side of the head. It was like hitting a sandbag. It didn't even slow him down. Before I could build up the momentum to swing again, he grabbed me. It surprised me, making me trip over my own feet as he pulled me into the woods. He had this grip like a goddamn vice that just dug into my clothes, and he was much stronger than I anticipated. I was dragged along by my backpack. I managed to get it off and escape his grip for a moment, but before I could get away, those hands got me by the neck of my jacket. No matter how much I kicked and screamed, I could see the lights by the road disappearing further and further away. I got dragged through brushes, saplings, and branches. Things were poking into my skin, tearing at my clothes. I could barely breathe, but I kept struggling. The man in the yellow scarf just kept pulling me further away from the light, all the while panting with rapid breaths. It didn't matter how much I screamed, squirmed, or twisted. Those hands weren't letting up. We battled for what felt like hours. I got out of my jacket, and he grabbed me by the foot. I got my shoes off, but he just grabbed my belt. After a while, I was just too tired to fight. I resigned to just holding on to whatever I could reach to try and slow him down, but all it did was bruise my hands. At some point, I just laid there, exhausted, as he dragged me further into the woods. The rough forest floor turned to soft grass as I was pulled into a field. The full moon was out, and I could see all the way through the clearing. The man in the yellow scarf suddenly stopped and inhaled a deep breath, his torso swelling up like a balloon. There was a faint crackle as his ribs readjusted. He was smelling something. I made an attempt to get up, but he just kicked me back down and put a foot on my torso. At the slightest movement, he would press down to keep me in check. There were others there. I could hear them shuffle through the tall grass. From where I lay, I could only see the top half of them. There were 3 of them in total, 2 men and a woman. 2 of them were carrying their own bus signs. All 3 of them were wearing scarves, similar to that of my assailant. One of the men hissed, with his mouth wide open. He made this threatening stance and stepped forward, but my attacker didn't flinch. Instead, he hissed back. It wasn't a normal sound. It was like someone desperately trying to cough, but never quite getting the phlegm out. I felt like prey to a predator, as they non-verbally argued about who gets to do something. Something grabbed me by the neck. A fourth one, still wielding a bus stop sign. I was pulled away, and as my attacker flinched, they pounced on him. It escalated into a full-on brawl, but not like any fight I'd ever seen. They were contorting their bodies at impossible angles, their torsos swelling and shrinking like blowfish. They kept thrusting their necks forward while their heads just bobbled back and forth. In the confusion, I started crawling. No one was looking at me. I crawled on my belly, trying to get away. My ankle was killing me. Every little bump sent a jolt of pain up my leg all the way through my spine. Suddenly they all stopped. At the edge of the forest clearing, I could see yet another one. This one was much larger. A woman, easily 6 feet 8 inches. She was carrying a bus stop sign. This one of a slightly different model. And she had someone thrown over her shoulder. Another victim. Before I could react, hands grabbed me, my arms, my legs, my clothes, and they started to drag me through the clearing. Whatever disagreements they'd had must have been cleared up by the presence of this leader character. Out of reflex, I tried to talk. I demanded that they listen to me, that they explained themselves. Anything. I could hear my voice breaking as I got nothing but vacant expressions in return, these dumb, rolling eyes, all of them blinking at random, all of them taking shallow breaths. But this last one, the large one, she was something different entirely. She moved like her joints didn't matter. She bent her arms back and forth, and she kept swiveling her head like an owl. Her mouth was wide open, like she was constantly screaming. But she didn't make a sound, just a completely vacant expression. We got to a mound at the edge of the clearing, where they'd made a makeshift shelter. They dug into the dirt and covered it in branches and moss. It was also a sort of storage, with at least a dozen different signs. Stop signs, bus stop signs, and even a couple of simple benches. This was some sort of tactic to catch people who were either on their own, lost, or desperate. They utilized anything that could make a victim change their behavior. To stop for a moment, or wait. The large one dropped the person next to me. An overweight, balding man in his late 20s, with some of the bluest eyes I'd ever seen. He was nodding in and out of consciousness, and I could see deep bruises on his neck. He must have been choked out. As our 5 attackers started going through their collection of signs and symbols, I tried to wake the other victim. He was completely out of it, muttering something about white doors and gardens. I couldn't make sense of it. When he finally came to, he could barely form a coherent sentence. My first thought was that he needed medical attention. He was clearly unwell, but still he was coming to. They got me at a red light, he wheezed. Pulled me out of the car. They got me at a bus stop, had a fake sign. Do they want money? I got money. I don't think so. There was something deeply inhuman about these people. If they wanted money, they would have just killed me. No, they wanted something else. And it worried me. Before we got a chance to talk, they grabbed him by the foot and dragged him along the ground. The large woman didn't even flinch. This guy was easily 300 pounds, but she pulled him along like he was a bag of chips. He flailed and protested, the sleeve of his shirt getting stuck and pulled off on a sharp root. They all helped each other holding him down, as he looked at me, calling for help. Those desperate pale blue eyes. Never seen anything like them before. The large one took off her scarf, revealing a massive wound in the middle of her throat. It still looked red and fresh. A throat wound leading all the way into her esophagus, showing the contracting raw musculature. That's where the whistling sound had come from. I could see it now. They weren't just taking shallow breaths. They were cycling their lungs. While one lung breathed in and out, the other did so at a different interval. Like when you pedal a bike, one foot goes up, one goes down. That's why the chests moved so much. They were constantly breathing. The whistling came from them inhaling and exhaling seemingly simultaneously and continuously. These weren't people. These were something different entirely. The large woman leaned in close, hugging her victim, putting their necks against one another. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I had to do something. Anything. I grabbed the sharp root with the ripped-off shirt sleeve. I intended to use it as a weapon, swinging it wildly, but I couldn't get over the pain in my leg. There was no way I'd get away from them. They were fast, unharmed, and could do things that I just couldn't. So I just sat there with my root, watching the large woman undulate, with something large moving in and out of the wound in her throat, still with that expressionless face. I put all the things I knew together. They had displayed a kind of social structure. This was an alpha. They had tactics. They need their victims alive for something. And all of the people I was looking at were just people. There was no pattern. Just broken, twisted people. So I had to try something. Anything. Using the torn-off sleeve, I tied it around my neck, using the blue sunflower pin to hold it together. It was a rudimentary scarf, in a way. Then, I got up, and before the rest of them caught on, I walked up and stood next to my attacker. The man with the flannel shirt and yellow scarf, I tried to mimic their expressions. There was an immediate reaction. The man with the yellow scarf looked at me, then back at the others. They, in turn, just looked at the alpha. She leaned her head back, leaving the exposed wound in her victim open to the air. I could see something white moving in her throat, like a long white tongue retracting into her chest. There was a moment of silence as she observed us. She seemed confused. I tried to blink seemingly at random and take shallow breaths. I could feel something wet on my throat. Apparently there was a little blood, probably from my hands. The alpha got up, her head bobbing back and forth. She hissed. There was a vibration as something rattled in her chest. My attacker seemed agitated, and he pushed me away. I fell over next to the signs as the alpha stormed forward, first to discipline my attacker with a show of force, and then to inspect me. I grabbed a stop sign and got up, letting the adrenaline flow through me. I couldn't show pain. I just couldn't. Rapid breaths, blink at random. Head on a swivel. I had to look like them, or this was doomed to fail. The alpha looked me over, making a rattling noise. She smelled the blood, poked at me, and presented her neck. I could see the wound just inches from my face, and all the way down her throat, I saw something bone-white, rattling back and forth like a stick in a barrel. She reached for my sleeve scarf, held together by that tiny pin. As her cold hands touched my neck, and her fingers started to bend into a grip, she suddenly stopped. The other victim was moving. I could have sworn he was dead, but he was moving now. A long, white, branch-like appendage was moving out of his open neck, reaching for open air, and for a moment, the group just looked at him. His body screamed. Not him as a person, but his body. A long drawn-out shriek. A grown body crying like a newborn. Blood still spurting from his open wound. They all gathered around him. But as my assailant stepped forward, The alpha hissed, causing him to retreat. Then, looking at me, it hissed again. It didn't like me, and it wanted me to leave, both me and my assailant. Still holding the bus stop sign, I tried my best to confidently walk out of there. The sign had this heavy lead pipe that I could use to defend myself if need be. I got about 40 feet before I realised I was being followed. The man in the yellow scarf was still coming for me, and he seemed angry. But this time, I had a sturdier weapon. I tried to gain some ground, to get away from the others. Whether they had been tricked by my antics, or just didn't like me, didn't matter. It was just me and this outcast, and as he charged me to wrestle me down again, I was ready. This time I swung my bus stop sign in an overhead arc, like I was chopping firewood. I closed my eyes. I held my breath, and hit him square in the chest. This was much more effective, and he doubled over. I just started beating him over and over, as his chest expanded and shrunk. As his scarf fell off, I could see something poking in and out of his neck wound. Something white, looking for an opportunity to escape. It pressed against his throat, making it bulge like a snake throwing up an egg. I just kept beating him. I beat him until the white thing stopped moving, until I was covered in blood, until the shrieking died down, until the fingers stopped twitching in different directions, and until the head stopped swiveling back and forth. I beat him until my muscles burned, and my breathing turned rapid from exhaustion. When I finally wiped the salt from my eyes, I was looking at nothing but broken bone and a yellow scarf. I barely remember making my way back to the main road. I remember collapsing as the sun rose, and a man in a pickup truck calling for help. I remember a familiar face. A white door. Something blue. Later on, my friend drove down from Morgantown to see me, and I got a dozen calls from friends and family asking me if I was okay. They also had me take a drug test. Apparently, I'd acted irrationally. Just be careful. They can easily be identified. They wear something to cover their necks, and they travel one by one. They use something to get our attention or to separate us from others. Stop signs to catch lonely drivers. Bus stop signs to get drifters. They probably have a dozen other similar tactics. I think they're learning about us with second-hand information, testing and prodding to see what works. They don't talk, and they can be very patient. That first one stayed with me for a long time before he attacked. Maybe he was making sure I was alone. Looking back at it, I can barely even believe it happened. You ever have that one day that is just so different from anything else you've ever done? That one day that just feels like another life, another time. That was one of those days. Sometimes I even managed to convince myself that it was all a lie. A nightmare. Something I cooked up in my sleep-deprived brain. But then I look at that blue sunflower pin, the one that held that sleeve together, and I know they're still out there. There was once a world outside our own. It wasn't very different. You could find supermarkets, dating apps, and cheap flights with rude flight attendants. People walking their dogs, worrying about that strange noise coming from the muffler of their struggling Honda Civic. They had it changed just 2 months ago. What are the odds of that thing breaking again? But things changed, slowly at first. Some say it started with spots in the night sky where stars looked different. Others said it was lightning strikes that would stick to the clouds for minutes at a time. But those in the know would know the truth. It really started with a peculiar blue sunflower blooming in a place where it shouldn't. The world began to break the rules, basic concepts that we all take for granted. Gravity would shift and shake. time itself would jump ahead and lag behind. There were lights in the depths of the sea, making ocean life spin in maddening circles, dancing a choreographed piece that no one had taught them. There was panic, doomsday cults, riots in the streets. Fundamental concepts would break, and the effects would grow more severe in rapid succession. You could walk down the street a teenager and come out the other side an old man, could be thrown into the sky and fall to their deaths 2 towns over. The government wasn't surprised. The unravelling had been ongoing for years, and they had done their best to prepare. They'd worked on ways to send people across dimensional lines, hoping to find more stable lands to settle. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. There was a particular substance that could be refined from the leftover matter of dimensional ripples. They managed to refine it into a metal and weave it into protective gear. They used it to create a dimensional anchor suit. It would settle the wearer into a stasis position, making them effectively immortal. It was the only thing powerful enough to send people across the unravelling dimensional lines. However, this wasn't an exact science. There needed to be an initial test. There would come a time when they managed to stabilise the tech enough to send people through without the suits. But by then, billions would be dead. A handful of people would turn into dimensional refugees. But long before then, there was that first person to take a leap of faith. That's who this story's about. Geraldine Dina Jordan worked on a lot of government projects. She was a combat pilot known for her willingness to experiment and expand. She was dedicated, honest, loyal, and first and foremost, available. When they needed that first person to put on the suit and step through the gate, Geraldine was the first to come to mind. Once that dimensional portal was open, there would be no way to tell what was going to happen. So to be safe, they decided to perform the initial run on the spaceship Resolution, well out of our atmosphere. That way, if something unintended stepped through, at least it would be isolated. Come launch day, Geraldine was strapped into the protective suit. It had a completely ink-black cover, like dry gelatin, interlaced with a metal weave that rippled in anticipation of her movements, making her every step look like the shadow of something that had already happened. It looked like the suit was wearing her, and not the other way around. Geraldine was going to step into this rudimentary space vessel with an untested dimensional portal, wearing an experimental stasis suit. None of this was tested. Everything was based on speculation, desperation, and cutthroat mad genius type breakthroughs that came at the cost of hundreds of lives. The most brutal and cruel flavour of altruism. For Geraldine, things weren't so bad. There was her family cheering for her from the launch pad, people holding signs, live streams from various institutions around the world, wishing her all the best. Also, the suit was comfortable. Despite it covering her completely, it didn't impede her vision. It was like wearing a one-sided mirror. Also, it made her feel light. She kept making these little jumps, thinking she could see herself floating. It was curious, but not unpleasant. She was nervous, of course, but she had never been let down before. She and the suit had passed all the tests. They could withstand however many Gs the machines could put her through. She could take a gunshot to the chest without spilling a drop of blood. She could stay underwater for hours. In every simulation, she came out unscathed. In theory, she could survive the vacuum of space itself. They'd done 2 test launches with plenty of margin for error. The power required to run the dimensional break was immense, so it would only be open for a couple of seconds. She'd practiced the maneuver hundreds of times. Click the button, count to 2, step through. There was a rhyme to it, made it simple, but they could only account for so many errors. If it hadn't been for a twist of fate, things would have gone fine. But there was a time dilation effect over the launch site for about 0.3 seconds. You could only notice it from the outside. These effects would come and go, one of the many features of a collapsing dimension. But it was just 0.3 seconds. The launch went perfectly fine. People could see the vessel for miles, rising like a reverse shooting star. Geraldine Jordan watched the clouds give way to the darkness of the endless, leaving her weightless in her seat. She had prepared for this moment, and she was ready for come what may. She would step through that portal and become the first person in the Promised Land, a chance for everyone to start over, for things to get better. So, she grasped the controls. She flipped the protective plastic and pressed once to prime the generators. She let the suit provide her oxygen as she took a deep breath. Her form floated forward as she pressed the button, but something curious happened. Problem was that the dilation effect was in reverse. Everything happened a little quicker than it ought to. To the naked eye, it just seemed like instruments and gauges reacted faster than anticipated. However, the portal engaged exactly 0.3 seconds before she even pressed the button, meaning the portal was already activated the moment she actually pressed the button. The conflicting signals caused an overload, short-circuiting the firing mechanism, causing a cascade of power failures. Geraldine floated forward, expecting to step through to another place, but instead bumped into the frame of the inactive portal. It was a sleek chrome, casting a distorted reflection back at her. She looked strange in that suit. Maybe it was the shape of the glass-like circus, like a funhouse mirror. She barely looked human. "CENTCOM, what's going on?" she asked. "Sit rep." The voice on the other end came through, a project supervisor huffing into the microphone. "Jordan!" he yelled, abandoning protocol. "Jordan, why'd you push it twice?" "I pressed it once. What are you talking about?" "You press the charge, then you engage. You don't spam it like a goddamn arcade machine." "I'm not spamming shit, CENTCOM. I did exactly what you told me to." "Our diagnostics say different, Jordan." "You... God, what?" She could feel the blood rushing to her cheeks. Her glorious moment had been pulled from under her feet. She hit the side of the portal frame, but all it did was reverberate with a gentle hum. They tried to talk her through manual repairs, but there was no way to do it. The parts needed to fix the power supply had to be handcrafted by a team of specialists. It would take weeks. Problem was, Jordan was drifting. The same power that was supposed to start the portal was also meant to slow her ascent into a stable orbit. Now it had misfired, instead leading her further and further out from our pale blue dot. Even if they could get the parts needed to fix it, it would take months to create something that could get it to her. And by then, she would be too far away to receive it. They spent hours turning the problem every which way. At one point, the project supervisor just cut off the comms entirely, leaving Geraldine in the literal dark of space. She didn't dare to look back. She didn't want to know how far out she'd gotten. "They got this," she whispered. "They got this." They always know what to do. But something in her mind whispered something else. It whispered that things were different this time. That these people were not to be trusted. That you can only trust people to a point. And that when things really matter, they disappoint you. "I disagree," Geraldine mumbled. "They come through in the end." But the other voice wasn't convinced. They agreed to disagree. Shortly after, the comms came back online. "Talk to me, CENTCOM," Geraldine said. "I need some good news." There was someone on the other end, but the voice was getting distant and distorted. Static crawled through her internal speakers. like the sound of tearing paper. Geraldine could hear them breathing, but there were no words. There was nothing to say. "Come on, Sencom," she continued. "Talk to me. Please." "There's no good way to say this." A voice came through barely. "You messed up. You messed up bad. I didn't. You know I didn't. It was a button press. It was just..." Saying it out loud made it all real. So real. A stone sank into her chest, and every word that didn't lift it just made it dip further and further down. "We can twist and turn it any way we want. Let's say you did things perfectly. You're amazing. You're absolutely blameless in this. That does not change the reality of our situation. And what is that? What is that situation? We have steering rockets, but even at maximum throttle, we can only adjust the course about 20 degrees. Apart from that, we've got nothing. So we got 20 degrees. Geraldine laughed. "Let's pump those numbers up." "Dina, you're not getting it. You said 20. I can make it 40. It's not done until it's done. It can't be done. And in about 6 hours, you'll be out of range." "Out of range for what?" A sigh came through. In the silence between words, Geraldine felt her beating heart. She could still sense a voice underneath whispering to her. This was exactly what it had warned her about. For everything. Comms, remote control, all of it. You'll be a floating wreck. I'm sorry. So we got 6 hours. I can work with that. I'm sorry. No, please, I can't just... Dina, I'm sorry. But you can't leave me here to... Her voice broke, mimicking the crackle of the struggling communications array. She bit her lip and let her pain out in a sob. "I don't know what the fuck to think, Sencom. But I know you were going to stay with me every step of the way. And now you're saying that's a step too far. Which is it? I am sorry. I don't know what to do." They argued. They cried together. But after 6 hours, those comms would die. And they would die 0.3 seconds earlier than anticipated. Geraldine had cried for the first time in years, bawling like a child. She pulled out every panel, checked every connection. She kicked the booster rockets into a full turn, hoping the whiplash could put her into a kind of reverse spin. All it did was set her into a slow rotation. If she squinted out the front window, it looked like the entire universe revolved around her. It was a comforting thought, like the universe itself was correcting itself to apologize to the blameless victim. 6 hours turned to 12, turned to 20. Lights flickered and died as temperatures and pressures would drop. And yet, Geraldine didn't feel anything. The suit held her tight, keeping her perfectly comfortable. That worried her. If the ship broke apart, she'd still be there. She would float through the nothingness of space for as long as there'd be time. Or she could take it off. At least that's what she thought. She hadn't tried taking it off for a while. This was, by far, her longest session wearing it, but taking it off meant abandoning all hope and submitting to nothingness. Was nothingness really better than pain and isolation? After all, pain is something. Something is always better than nothing. You can adapt to something, turn it into something else. But dying? That's nothing. Some whirring mechanism stopped, perhaps a cooling fan. Geraldine didn't care. She was floating around, curled into a fetal position. She was trying to make her life flash before her eyes, but she couldn't. She was too alive in her suit, making her body refuse to accept the reality of the situation. She could kick and scream all she wanted, and it would do nothing. It wouldn't even tire her out. "What if we just stopped thinking?" she said out loud. "We could enjoy the ride." Let ourselves become a brain mush. The voice behind her heart didn't think that was such a bad idea. It was better than eternal nothing. But perhaps she could try something else. "What?" she asked. "Try what?" "Taking off a little piece, like a glove, just to see what would happen." "Sure." Geraldine sighed. Why the hell not? One of her gloves slipped off. It was thinner than silk, and even back on Earth it had weighed little to nothing. In the emptiness of space, that glove might as well have been nothing. She observed her hand as a sudden pain crept into her nerves. She tried moving her fingers only to feel something snap and break. Her hand was freezing from the void, trying to send pain signals for her to adhere to. But it didn't work as intended. Instead, her hand ended up frozen solid, without her feeling a thing. She slipped the glove back on, and in a matter of minutes, her hand was perfectly fine. What's this good for? She panted. Another way to feel pain? The voice remarked that it could change properties. It could make her feel pain all the time, if she wanted. It could change other things too. Oh yeah? What kind of things? The voice told her about little things. Seeing new colours. Tasting new tastes. It was very versatile, and eager to help. I'll take that into consideration. The voice knew she would. It could understand her pretty well. She was so clever. More so than she gave herself credit for. Geraldine couldn't tell how much time had passed. She knew that every rotation of the vessel took about 1 minute and 23 seconds. But there was no point in counting. In the vastness of infinity, a day or a year is just a number. She thought about everything for a while, reviewing all the memories she could muster in a sort of mental slideshow. Her first memory, her first kiss. She would hyperfixate on little details, like the taste of the plastic fork she'd used at her mother's dinner table. Little sensations forever burned into her unconscious mind. Brought to the surface, she would stop blinking, breathing. She didn't need oxygen in her lungs. The suit provided all. She didn't need to blink. Her eyes didn't dry. It was all just maintenance, and she had no need for such things. Instead, she floated back and forth, imagining the many wonders of her life as they played out before her in a mind gallery. But after a while, she'd seen that gallery. She'd seen it 5 times or more. 10 times. 100. There were no more sensations to review. Some of them started to fade from memory. This, if anything, terrified her. She needed to feel human again. So she asked the voice for a favour. I want to feel, she said. Turn yourself off for a while. Let me feel. But don't let it kill me. Not yet. The voice obliged and held its immaterial breath. There was a lightning bolt of pain as the temperature of her body dropped. Her lungs had atrophied, but there was no oxygen to breathe anyway. It reminded her of a particularly deep dive she'd done back when she was part of the swim team. She would always press herself a little too hard, going a little too far. But that's what made her the best, throwing herself into something no one thought she could do. Not even herself at times. It was the worst pain she'd ever felt. And it was the sweetest. As her vision darkened, relief came creeping back as the suit reactivated. Geraldine bounced from wall to wall. She was comfortable again, but she still felt the need to move and warm herself. Yes, she called out. I was the best. I was leading the way from the front. The voice was so proud of her. She really was the best. It couldn't have asked for a better partner. Maybe I can get better, Geraldine said. Maybe I can, I don't know, exercise, adapt. The voice liked that. It thought she was making some good points. It would help her, if possible. It turned into a kind of training regimen. She would turn the suit on and off, exposing herself to freezing temperatures and vacuum pressures over and over again. After a while, she forgot she was doing it. The suit had covered her body in scabs and scar tissue that would grow and fatten in response, allowing her to stay without the protection of the suit for longer and longer. Even though it looked horrible, Geraldine was happy. She was feeling something. She was changing something. It was something else. Away from the nothing. She didn't slow down. The agony would come and go. It's not that it wasn't there. She would just get better at handling it. At one point, she could see her body go through a cycle as boils and cysts would grow, freeze, and break off, leaving room for more to grow in their place. As the suit reactivated, Geraldine had a curious thought. She saw these little bits and pieces of herself float around the vessel. It was a physical thing now, separate from her. How unusual. They were things made from her. Just... how much can we change? She asked the voice. The voice was intrigued. It could change her a lot. If time wasn't a factor, it could change her in any way she wanted. Time passes differently in a vacuum. Geraldine looked out and didn't recognize the stars. But then again, maybe the stars were the same. Maybe her eyes were different. Even without the influence of the suit, she could feel calluses forming on her face. When she held her hand up, it looked swollen and grey, like the ship itself had seeped into her skin. This wasn't change she'd asked for. It was entropy. How long had she been out there? A couple of days? A week? A month? The voice reassured her. It had tried to reach others before, but had never been heard. Geraldine had been the first, and it cared for her a great deal. If she concentrated enough, and if she could imagine a change in herself, it could happen. All she would need to do is shed the old to make way for the new. If she pulled her hair out, the next string of hair would be a new colour. If she pulled a tooth, she could get a sharper one. This gave Geraldine an uncomfortable idea. She let one of her fingers freeze in the vacuum, then broke it off with a snap. A powerful spike shot through her body like an electric shock, making her gasp for air. Air that she didn't need, and that her lungs would have rejected. The sting faded as the finger grew back. Geraldine tried to imagine the finger being a little longer and thinner. She repeated the process again, and again, and again. Pain, pain, pain. After a while, she had a dozen broken fingers. Comparing the first and the last, there was about half an inch in size difference. Can we change other things? She asked the voice. Can we change blood? Sweat? The voice was curious about her intention, and it reassured her. They could change anything. It would just take time and sacrifice. Geraldine stabbed herself with a hollow metal pipe, making a sort of blood tap. That way she could continuously bleed, while the suit replenished her. If she concentrated enough, she could, in theory, change the makeup of her own bodily fluids. She tried to imagine the sodium and chlorine in her blood becoming more conductive, hardening. All the while, the drops spilling out of her were enough to send her into a cautious, weightless spiral, making her body roll around the ship like a lawn sprinkler. The inside of the ship was soon covered in so much coagulated blood that she could no longer see the outside. It didn't matter much to her. If anything, the universe felt like a mockery. It was demeaning to her. All that opportunity and exploration full of nothing. Seeing it was no more exciting than closing her eyes. It was the same sensation, the same scale. Darkness. Her blood would start to look different. There was a little more, and it was a little thicker. She would feel no different, of course. If anything, it felt strange when the bleeding stopped. It did once when the pipe clogged. There was a sort of coagulate build-up on the inside. In response, Geraldine got more pipes and stabbed them all into her back. She would create a rotation where she would clean them one by one. making herself into a macabre human clock. The lights had gone out long ago. The vessel was never meant to survive this long. It was supposed to be a short trip, a small step. Instead, it spiraled on, leaving Geraldine in the eternal dark of an eternal void. But with her calloused hands, she would feel the outline of the inner ship. She could feel those light bulbs, and she wanted to change something. "I'll bring the lights back," she said. "I can do that. I can bring the lights back." At first, she thought she could shape her coagulated blood into a sort of stalactite. It didn't work. It was too hard to control and far too imprecise. She needed something soft, stretchy, and flexible. Geraldine broke off a piece of the instrument panel, scratching and shaping it into a makeshift knife. With it, she began the painstaking process of removing her blood vessels. She would fail. Even in her hardened state, the sensation was so alien that it could not be ignored. The pain was always there, but it was more of a nuisance than anything. It was much worse to nick a nerve. The sudden spasms would force her to start over, but she would keep at it, taking regular breaks, allowing the suit to make her whole. She would fail. She would give up. She would start again. This Sisyphean task kept sending her boulder back down the hill, but she knew for a fact that it wasn't impossible. She could feel. And most important of all, the voice would tell her so. At one point, everything looked like blood. A long string of red stretched from her shaking arm to a single bulb. She'd imagined herself as a battery. A hand covered in stone-like nodules pressed the red string against the connector of the bulb, praying that she had changed enough to make a difference. "Please," she whispered, "please bring me light." The voice begged along with her. Something had to give. Something had to change. She pressed her fingers harder, and there was light. She could barely see it. So many layers covered her unblinking eyes, leaving the bulb as a butter-like blemish in the dark. But it worked. As long as it stayed connected to her, it worked. She repeated the process, getting steadier and more precise with a blade. Soon she could pull longer blood vessels. She would avoid the nerves. She could pull one out, heal the wound, and pull another, over and over and over. She would float around the vessel exposed, red strings following her like the loose strings of a Victorian dress. A light would come back as one connection completed, then another. A diode on the instrument panel, little sparks of life at her command. She tried to laugh, but there was no air to fill her lungs. "We can change," she said. "We really can. Look." She spun around. One or two lights would turn off from the reckless shift, but most of them would just sway and float. She imagined herself like a bioluminescent jellyfish, floating through the darkest pit of the ocean. The voice was so proud. It was convinced of the many great things she could do, and it reiterated its promise to help at all costs. In a moment of clarity, Geraldine stopped to think. The voice hadn't lied to her as of yet. But was it telling the entire truth? And if it didn't, did it matter? "I have a question," she said. The voice was intrigued. "How exactly can you put me back together?" It was no secret, the voice assured. There were many Geraldines, in many places. They all had blood and nerves and skin. The voice came from the space between those places. To fix her, it simply reached out and grasped another Geraldine, taking whatever it needed to put her back together. "What happens to the others?" she asked. The voice thought it was obvious. The others couldn't live without those things. They would die, so she could live. They'd gone through tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of Geraldines by now. But in the scale of the infinite, what did it matter? Geraldine wanted to be angry. She really did. But in another way, she couldn't help but think that maybe the others were the lucky ones. They weren't taunted by the possibility of survival. They had their choice made for them. How comforting. She would get more invasive. She would break and strengthen her bones, only to rip them out and shape them into tools and support structures. She fashioned needles from her finger bones, scissors from her shin bone, a hammer from a femur. Ceaseless inhuman torture, numbed and forgotten. She would change the lining of her skin into a mild adhesive for repairs, her saliva into lubricant, giving it the texture of fish oil. She would turn the main cabin of the vessel into a reflection of her literal inner body, highlighted by whatever scrap and electronics remained. The voice kept her mind occupied. It reminded her that none of this was her fault. She was blameless in this. And if she considered her situation logically, this proved something about people as a whole. It does, Geraldine asked. Pray tell. People are finite. Humanity as a whole was finite, but the suffering and pain they could inflict was infinite. It wasn't fair for something fleeting to affect something permanent, at least not mathematically. If I can just get back home, all will be forgiven, she said. All will be well. The voice agreed. Maybe all would be fine. Then again, maybe it wouldn't be. Maybe for this one person, suffering really was infinite. If so, it would still be there, long after all the people were gone. Geraldine would use herself for various components, requiring more invasive procedures. She had never worked on a ship like this before, but she had faith that she could change herself just enough to better understand things. After all, if her recovery was made from pieces of other Geraldines, maybe she could direct herself to be repaired with the mind of a rocket scientist. The voice thought it was brilliant. If she only took out a little piece of her brain, that might be enough. How come I can't hear your voice? Geraldine asked. I can feel it, but I can't hear it. The voice wondered if she thought she was really speaking. Aren't I? She was not. She had not been able to speak for quite some time. In fact, most of her facial features had morphed and atrophied. Her tongue was swollen and hard. Speaking was like trying to smack two rocks together. I still feel like I'm speaking, thought Geraldine. Can I change back? The voice wasn't sure. It thought she could, but it would take time. And first, she would have to come home. Yes, Geraldine agreed. Home. With every modification to her body and ship, Geraldine resembled less and less of a human being. She would create battery packs from acidic hearts, pumping a modified solution through a series of intestinal tubes. When the final light died, she made a bioluminescent organ to replace it. All it took was time and thoughts. The suit would do the rest. And finally, she would connect her brain to the mainframe. She could feel something changing, a word disappearing, a thought, a memory, or a smell. But at the end of every line was a change from something into something else. And in that moment, there would be new light. A red light on the mainframe would turn green. A 0 would turn to a 1 as her body learned to interface with the machine. She would change herself in infinitesimal ways, fusing herself with the remaining electronics. And at some point, there was more of Geraldine outside herself than inside. And yet, she would keep going. She would repair, and things would continue. One day, she wasn't floating around the main cabin. She wasn't really moving at all. Or perhaps she was. It was hard to tell where the ship stopped, and she began. Her nerves were integrated with the sensors. She could see more with the communications array than with her eyes. She could feel more from hull reports than her rock-like skin. She could feel hundreds of pulses as a steering rocket hummed to life, burning fuel she had painstakingly borne from her stomach. The rotation of the ship had slowed. A screen came online, helping her plot a course. A part of her mind had designed a way to navigate the foreign stars. Another part of her brain could understand the throttle power of rockets, but a part of her original mind remained. The part that wanted to go home. The part that knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she was blameless in all of this. She had done nothing to deserve this. Nothing. And one day, Geraldine used a practiced thought to plot a course for home. She was happy, but her mouth could not smile. She sailed across the stars toward familiar skies, Neptune, Mars, Saturn. They would pass by like raindrops in a storm. By the end of the longest day, she sensed a pale blue dot in the distance. Home. Geraldine thought it was curious. She thought she'd been gone for billions of years, but from what she could gather it was, at most, 2. The voice explained that perhaps time works differently for those wearing the stasis suit. Not that Geraldine was wearing it anymore. It was bundled up somewhere in the core of her physical self, replacing the true place of a heart. It was all just details. It wouldn't matter soon enough. She would come home, blameless and perfect. Those on the ground couldn't understand what they were seeing. There was no way for them to tell it was Geraldine Jordan and the spaceship Resolution entering their orbit. For all intents and purposes, it was just an unusual meteor. People across the Midwest watched it fall, burning across the sky. Geraldine felt all of it. The endless fires and the effort to keep herself together. Every exposed nerve, every broken bone, everyone's struggling organ. It was all engulfed in flames, but the suit would keep enough of her alive all the way past the clouds. And somewhere in a forest in rural Minnesota, what remained of Geraldine Jordan made landfall. She could not stand on her legs. Maybe she didn't have them anymore. The air burned her just as badly as the fire. Moisture would make her skin crackle and sear. After all this time, she had become maladapted to the environment she was meant to live in. But she was home. There were soldiers and helicopters. There were spotlights and screams and weapons. The Geraldine thing would fumble and move, spilling out of her metal casing. The soldiers were there to see her, she thought, to welcome her back. They could finally admit that she had been blameless in all this, and that they could make things right. They would. They had to make it right. They always knew what to do. It's going to be okay, she thought. But then, there was fire. Napalm, white phosphorus, whatever they could find. To the soldiers, Geraldine was an abomination that had to be destroyed. There was no argument to be had. There was nothing human left to save. And the most peculiar thing happened. Her wounds did not heal. Put me back, she thought. Put me back together. But the voice couldn't. It had run out of Geraldine's. How can you run out? We are infinite. There will always be more. But that wasn't the case. There could only be so many Geraldines. At some point, they stopped being a Geraldine, instead turning into something else. If she had been born a boy, she would have been a Gerald. Could that still be considered Geraldine? I don't care about names and semantics, she cried. I don't care where you take it from. I deserve to live. I deserve to be made whole. The fires roared and spread. Her voice echoed as a gargling shriek, booming across the pine forest. The voice was beyond itself with grief, trying to do whatever it could to help. It would find an arm, a patch of skin, whatever it could. But it was not enough to save her. Geraldine imagined her eyes closed. Consider this, she thought. I am part of my mother and father. They are part of me, and I am part of them, and they have mothers and fathers in turn. I may have siblings. I may have cousins. Are they not partly me? The voice agreed. Part of it was her. And imagine this across the countless dimensions where you have been, where you have taken to preserve me. The voice considered this. An appendage the size of a sedan turned to charcoal and fell off Geraldine, and she felt nothing. There could only be so much pain to feel. My breaths are in the lungs of lovers. My blood may be inside my children. My very image is burned into the mind of bystanders passing me on the street. Those are all me. Those are all mine. As the fire raged, Geraldine stretched and bellowed. Terrified men and women recoiled from the alien craft. She had fought so hard to come home, and this was the welcome she'd get. Maybe the voice was right. Maybe it was inherently unbalanced for a finite kind to cause infinite hardship. And you, voice, she continued, we exist together. We are one and the same. And you are in all these places, in all these people. You are between spaces. Bring those pieces. She was in everything. Everyone. Everywhere. If the voice could see that and agree, she would be endless. It's all mine, and I want it back. I am blameless. I deserve more. Her heart would beat a final time. One more thought would press itself through a dying mind, crystallized to perfection. I hate them, the voice agreed. They had a similar view, and it would take a leap of faith in her. She could finally see what it wanted her to see, that people deserved to be hated. Across countless places and times things would change. A man would cough, losing his breath. A woman would feel a tightness of her skin. Nothing big, just a little something here and there. And in their place, a microscopic something would remain, a piece of something inhuman that had come to an understanding with something equally inhuman. The voice would grant everything, pieces of itself, of family, friends, lovers, children, even strangers on the street. Geraldine would soar. Boundless flesh spilled out, enveloping that forest in rural Minnesota. No amount of helicopters or gunfire or hand grenades could make a dent in the deluge of meat that poured from seemingly nowhere. Whatever it touched would become hers. And in turn, it would become her. It was hers. All of it. And she deserved it. She was blameless. Her blood would interface with electronics, listening to devices across the world. She would find them all. She would kill because she deserved to kill. She would cut herself into pieces, spreading like deathless trees across an increasingly barren landscape. And she herself would become a creature to rival the size of mountains. She was to become everything. Long after her rage had devoured and destroyed everything that distant place had to offer, all that would remain was a world of her creation, where time and gravity would break and reform across a dead dimension, where she would rule alone. But there would be other places, places where her beloved voice had reached, but not her touch. And in those places, strange things would happen. A house might grow teeth. A dead boy might breathe air into rust. Creatures would form in the darkest depths of the ocean, intelligent enough to rival the reign of humanity. It might start with the peculiar color of a sunflower, but it would always blossom into unearthly agony. Geraldine was blameless, and she would seep into so many things. Even here, she could reach them. In those places, little rules would break, and the veil between one place to another would grow thin. Geraldine would stay in the charred remains of that distant Minnesota forest, stretching to pull the stars down. She deserved them all. In another place and time, that forest would be a town that she would reach for, just as she reached for everywhere else. She was breaking through, and the little men would burn her with acid and flame. They would scream and beg and cry, as all their alarms bleated like dying sheep. They were going to try so very, very hard, but she would continue to reach, across time, across space. She hated them all. She was blameless, forever. Hi everyone, thanks for listening. So after binge reading all these Blameless related stories, like a gremlin who lost control of the scroll wheel, I've developed a personal theory. Opinion only. Please don't summon anything, just the ramblings of someone who has clearly inhaled too many cosmic spores at this point. Okay, so, across every story, the Blameless behaves differently. In Norwegian Float, it's a metal-infecting fungus. In Hatchetman Cove, it hijacks electronics like a demon with a diploma in IT. In the YouTube story, it literally copyright strikes reality. In Yearwalker, it's melting Uncle John into a sad little metal soup, while the cult worships a woman who looks like someone hit the randomize face generator button too many times. Every version is different, but the vibe is the same, which is why my personal theory is this. The Blameless isn't a creature, it's a phenomenon. Nothing is infected the same way. Everything is just vulnerable to the same signal. Humans, animals, computers, rainwater, code, memories. Every type of matter becomes a doorway the moment this thing touches it. It acts differently depending on the host, like an Eldritch Pokemon type chart. So, here's my favorite interpretation. The Blameless is not a being. It's a language. A biological language. A digital language. A psychological language. And I will reformat your brain like a USB stick language. I've said language too many times. It's a self-propagating instruction set. A cosmic update patch you didn't ask for but somehow still installed. When it lands in biology, it behaves like infection. When it lands in electronics, it behaves like corruption. When it lands in people, it behaves like obsession and prophecy. When it lands in cults, it behaves like religion with very questionable customer service. When it lands in metal, it behaves like transformation. When it lands in YouTube, it behaves like a copyright strike from Satan. Now I've said lands in too many times. Ugh. It's not choosing forms, it's choosing routes. It spreads down whichever path is easiest. Broken ecosystems, abandoned servers, grief, rituals, cults, the ocean, microchips, fungus, hatchet labs, and apparently my Google Drive if I'm not careful. This is also why everyone reacts differently. Some beg to die, some beg to kill, some melt, some glitch. Some start hearing their kettle whisper secrets, and Uncle John just straight up turns into a limited edition chrome Funko Pop. Nobody gets the same symptoms, because the Blameless adapts to each device differently. So no, I don't think everything's infected. My opinion is that everything is compatible. We're all accidentally running the same cosmic operating system, even though none of us are actually capable of handling the software. Hatchet says, the metal is without blame. We refined it. Which basically translates to, we pressed the wrong button, and now reality has malware. And honestly, that feels right. Every story is basically a different character describing the same event through a different sensory organ. The fungus sees one version. The metal sees another. The cult sees another. The servers see another. The Yearwalker sees another. It's like the blind men and the elephant, except the elephant is made of wet titanium and keeps asking you to kill it politely. And of course, there are many more stories the Blameless pokes its horrible little tendrils into. Trust me, I've read way more than I've narrated. Yes, I'm getting to them. I'm not a machine, I'm not blameless. Blameless. I'm just one person with a microphone and the attention span of a damp ferret. Which means the real question isn't what is the Blameless, it's when did it actually arrive and what made it start speaking to us. I'm interested in your take on this, so let me know what you think. Anyway, that's my completely unofficial, hopefully not blasphemous theory. But if your phone ever whispers submit, I recommend throwing the whole house away. Oh, and fun fact, I officially have members now. Well, I could have members. Right now, it's literally just me and my 5 alt accounts doing the heavy lifting like a tiny union of exhausted goblins. Want to fix that? Become a member. You get all kinds of cool shit like becoming a character in a future story, sneak peek videos no one else gets to see yet, weird little emojis I definitely put too much effort into, and the smug satisfaction of knowing you support my descent into full-time horror gremlin energy. So, join. Do it. Be a Corvus Vale resident, or go full chaos and become a keeper of the crow. Your move. Good night.